Hi, I'm Pam, and I'm here to talk about video games. At Summer Game Fest this past week, Ubisoft announced a brand new game, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which is a 2D side-scrolling metroidvania game. And I happened to go to Ubisoft Montpellier at the end of May in order to sample the game as well as talk to some of the game developers about it. So in this video, I'm just going to be telling you a little bit more about the game and answering a bunch of questions that I collected from Reddit, Twitter, and the community section on my YouTube page. So at the end of May, I spent an entire day at Ubisoft Montpellier with some other content creators from around Europe as well as Japan, and we were given a presentation, demonstration, and hands-on of the new Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown game. We heard a little bit about it and sort of the ideas behind it, and were given a couple chances to get hands-on with the game itself. The first was about a 45-minute segment of the game that we got to play that included some combat and platforming and a boss fight. We were able to capture this footage, so you'll see some of my own footage of me playing the game in this video. And then later on, we were given access to a couple sort of segments of the game, one of a harder platforming section, one of a different boss, and one of more of the sort of open world and exploration. In addition to that, we got a tour of the studio, got to see behind the scenes of the devs actually working on the game and see some of the work involved in that, and I got to interview 5 of the leads on the project, like the game director, the producer, the world designer, and the art and narrative directors. So first, just some general information about the game. This is an action-adventure platformer. It is a metroidvania. It is a 2D side-scroller, but it's actually built in 3D, so the camera will often pull back for cinematics and things like that. In the story of it, the prince and heir to the crown has been kidnapped, and you play the character Sargon, who is one of the immortals, which are a group of elite warriors in Persia, who is trying to find him. As you play, you'll be unlocking basic movement, combat, and time powers that will let you do better in combat, as well as explore and open up more of the map. The game will be releasing on January 18th, 2024 for Switch, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Luna. I don't know what a Luna is, and the price is almost full price. It is $49.99 US for the regular edition. Also, before I get to my thoughts on the game, just to get some ethics stuff out of the way, this video is not sponsored. Ubisoft did not pay me. However, they did fly me to France and house me and feed me while I was there, as well as give me a preview of the game and access to a bunch of developers who have made some of my favorite games of all time. So that's impressive in and itself. Do with that information what you will. If you're interested in knowing how this whole opportunity came about, I will talk about it at the end of the video, but I feel like most people are here to talk about the game. So during the first hands-on portion with the game, we were given access to it was basically a vertical slice. It was, I believe, the start or very close to the start of the game. However, we were given more abilities than you would actually start the game with. So whereas in the real thing, you'd be finding new abilities and gaining them as you go, here we already had a whole bunch of them so that we could play around with them and see how they feel. The very first thing that struck me is that movement is super smooth. Sargon feels really great to control. He feels very acrobatic and agile during combat and platforming. I often found myself sort of getting a lot of height, and movement just felt really good. There are a ton of different combat moves based on sort of what buttons you're pressing when you attack. There's like downward air attacks, there's slide attacks. If you're pressing left or right or up or down from the ground, he's doing different things with different cool animations. There's air dash, there's ranged arrow attacks that you can use. There's super moves that you have to sort of build up enough energy to use. We had access to 2 of them, so you could kind of switch between. One of them was like a big damage output, and one of them was something that created a healing zone on the ground so that you could restore your health. There was also a sort of teleport slash marker ability that I unfortunately just completely missed using on my first game session, but it basically allows you to set down sort of like a shadow of yourself, and then you go and you play and you can rewind back to that position. So there are sort of time powers in this game. There is also a lot of parrying, which will be important for combat, and there's very cool looking cinematics anytime you pull off a parry or use one of those special moves. Time also plays a factor because it seems like you're sort of restoring the kingdom to its former glory. In the game, the kingdom has sort of fallen on hard times as its protector has sort of abandoned it or left in some way. So there are these kind of time portals. Sorry, I don't have all the proper nouns down. I didn't learn them all. And as you go, if you hit them, it can sort of like rewind time and restore the kingdom. So the actual levels will change as you interact with those, which makes for some cool puzzle solving as well as just like a lot of visual interest. It does seem like it's a game that's going to be fairly heavy on story, getting to know both Sargon and the rest of the immortals. There are cutscenes to watch, as well as there are people out among the world who you can talk to and who will give you quests, most of which are optional quests, so there's a lot of side content in the game. There's also characters who hang around your hub area called Haven, some of them who will sell you things, or who can upgrade your abilities using the time crystals you collect throughout the game. There's also a minor equipment system with the use of amulets. You can equip a certain number of amulets at a time, and each of them will have a certain bonus. Some of them can sort of change the way abilities act or make you do more damage or things like that. Just sort of gives you a little bit of freedom in how you want to play the game. I'm always interested to know in Metroidvanias what happens when you die. And when you die, you return back to the last checkpoint. There are these sort of trees that you activate, and you can save at them as well as change your amulets. You do lose some of your time crystals. I asked, and it hasn't been finalized, but while I was playing, you would lose 10 time crystals, which wasn't a huge deal each time you died, but there was no like corpse running or having to return to your body to get back your currency or XP or any of that, which did make me very happy. I also asked the game director specifically about how he felt about player punishment to try to get a better handle on that. I thought the game was incredibly gorgeous. The art is really nice. As I mentioned, though it is a 2D game, it's all built in 3D, which I got a chance to see as the developers talked about and seeing them sort of working on it on their PCs. It's just really nice, really colorful. I find that the Montpellier games have a certain feel to them in terms of art, where they're just very vibrant and almost look like they're painted. There's also definitely some anime inspiration here in terms of animations and sort of graphical effects and things. And yeah, I thought it was gorgeous. We only got to see maybe 2 or 3 biomes. I think there's probably a dozen of them. They all looked nice and different, but everything still felt very cohesive. There are also like a ton of depth to the screen. So you're seeing things in the background as well as even foreground objects sort of in front of the plane that you're running on. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with the game. Again, I felt like the movement and the combat were very smooth. The world looked like it was going to be fun to explore, and I liked the characters, and I really liked the art direction. If I have any concerns, is that it might be a little on the story-heavy side. Personally, for Metroidvanias, I like to sort of stay in the action. So even though I asked a few of the developers about how they balance the narrative versus the action, I'll see how that goes if there's maybe too many cutscenes for my tastes, but it looks really good. It's fun to play. I also got to test it out on Switch on handheld mode, and though I would not play the game like that personally, it seemed to be running well, like the frame rates and everything. It wasn't choppy at all, so that's pretty good news. We're still 6 months out from release, and it's going well on Switch, it seems, which I know can kind of hold up other games. And I'm really just generally excited to have a AAA Metroidvania game. I've talked about this before when Metroid Dread came out, and though that one was underwhelming to me, I've, always had high hopes for what like a big budget studio could do with the genre. So I'm really excited that they decided to take the Prince of Persia franchise into this particular direction. But I think it looks really cool, and I'm looking forward to playing the full thing in January. So now on to some questions. I got questions over on Twitter, in the community tab, as well as over in the Metroidvania subreddit. If you're a Metroidvania fan, I suggest you go join that subreddit. And the number one question that I got was, is it a Metroidvania? And yes, it is. The developers talked extensively about how they took inspiration from the Metroidvania genre, how they wanted to bring it to a bigger audience. I did see in the studio a big map on the wall, which was one of the only things they asked me not to share in a video, but where you could see, for a couple biomes at least, the interconnecting paths. There was notes saying like double jump here, dash here, arrows here. So like you could see where different abilities were needed and sort of the different shortcuts and paths through the map that you could take. I don't have a good sense of what the pace of the ability progression will be, since, as I mentioned, the slice of the game we played gave us access to more abilities than we actually would have in the final game. And there was a lot of talk also with the world director specifically stressing how much effort was put into designing the world in a way that would like teach people and help them memorize and learn the map. So I had a question, how dark is Prince of Persia compared to similar games like God of War or Dante's Inferno? Talking blood, gore, decapitations, cursing, nudity. Didn't see any of that in the trailer. It gave me teen rating vibes. I would say that this is looking much less grim than those games. It still looks like it's trying to tell a fairly serious story, but it's not the grimy, grimdark, blood everywhere. It takes a lot of inspiration from anime, specifically Dragon Ball, in terms of its animation. So, rather than something getting decapitated, you're getting a flashy, graphically intense scene of Sargon, hitting an enemy or using a big spell. It's very anime inspired, specifically with those like attack cinematics. I also did not see any nudity. I can't say for sure, but I doubt there will be any in the game, and it hasn't been rated by the ESRB yet, but in the press release they put out, they were expecting a 16 plus, either teen or M rating. Another question I got a ton of was about the music. The initial reveal trailer used music that wasn't at all representative of what would be in the final game, which was kind of a strange choice, but it seems like a lot of trailers do that. The soundtrack is going to be done by Gareth Coker, who did the soundtracks to the Ori games, and Mentrix, who is a composer and singer who uses traditional Sufi and Iranian instruments. So the music is going to be very fitting of the setting of the game. I found it really enjoyable, what little of it I heard, but yeah, it's definitely going to fit the Prince of Persia setting much better than that original trailer did. Something else that a lot of people were curious about was the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake, which was, I guess, announced a few years ago and seems to have been in limbo. And if this is replacing it, this game is being done by a completely different Ubisoft studio than the remake, so the people here didn't talk about it at all. I don't think it would be replacing it, but it wasn't the focus of the event. Another question about what felt like the game's best strength: platformer, combat, exploration. From what I felt, I think it was the movement, which kind of impacts both the platforming and the combat. It's just super fluid to play, and Sargon's animations are so smooth and satisfying. Just very acrobatic. There's so many different kinds of like attacks and moves that you can do. I got to play a sort of tougher platforming section of the game that involved lots of spikes and moving things that could crush you, and just sort of like the dash and the wall jump and everything just felt really, really good. There's often sort of like poles on the wall that you can swing around and jump off of. Just the movement all felt great. So from what I saw, that was the standout. Someone asked, was there any attempt to make the characters Persian, use Persian words or concepts in world building, or include Persian architecture, or will this follow the modern trend of replacing all Mideastern representation with Afro-Caribbean? I don't see anything Afro-Caribbean in here, but a number of the devs I talked to stressed how much of an influence that actual Persian culture and history was in the game. Jean-Christophe, the art director, said that this was one of the biggest influences, and they worked with a Persian history expert to sort of ensure that they were getting things right. Was there any particular inspiration for the art style of this game?
Yeah, there are two main pillars, in fact. There's first the history, the Persian legacy. This area is so rich and little known in the same way. So the first thing, we immerse ourselves in this culture and this history. The temple, the castle, the natural landscape, all these kind of figures was really important. And we worked also with an expert for that, to check if we use the right markers for that. So it was very amazing, in fact. And when you discover this culture, you are amazed. And what we want after that is to translate this amazement to the players.
Persian mythology was used to create the bestiary and the enemies that you're going to be seeing in game. The group that Sargon is part of is the Immortals, which was a group of Persian warriors. The whole thing takes place on Mount Kaf, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, which was supposed to be under the protection of the Simurgh, which is a sort of mythological bird. And so everything's just very Persian inspired for sure. Yeah, so nothing here seems very Caribbean at all, but Afro-Iranians are a people, so you might want to look that up. Next question is, what is the difficulty like? Are there different difficulty settings? I didn't get the best sense of the difficulty, again, since I was given access to more abilities than I would have at the start of the game. But through the other segments I played, I found that it was of a good difficulty. I didn't find anything overly challenging, though bosses definitely took me a couple tries to do. I really liked the platforming. It seemed a good difficulty to me, a little bit easier than the combat, though I tend to be better at platforming than combat anyways. There are a number of difficulty options. I asked the game director about this. The first one is there is an explorer mode and a guided mode, and this impacts impacts like the metroidvania parts of it. So for people who don't really like getting lost, the guided mode will offer much more guidance on where you should be going next, as opposed to the explorer mode, which lets you sort of do your own thing and figure it out yourself. But there will also be more granular difficulty options, like either player or enemy health, maybe both, the length of the parry window, and the overall speed of the game. In what you played, were there any time powers, or does this seem to harken back closer to the series' roots? There are time powers. The one that I got to play with when I finally remembered to use it was that sort of marker teleport ability where you drop a copy of yourself, go do something, and then if you're about to die or something, you can rewind back to where you dropped the copy. There's also, the dash is sort of timey, but not really. There's the time elements that are out in the world that you can hit them in order to change the environment around you. I really need to stop hitting my microphone. There will also be at least one other time power that Sargon gets. Don't know what that is yet. And apparently, some of the enemies in the game will have the type of time powers that you may have seen in previous Prince of Persia entries. Did you experience a fail state? Yes, you can definitely die in the game in combat or from platforming. When you do, you just go back to the latest save point or sort of checkpoint. As I mentioned before, you do currently lose a few of your time crystals when you die. I will probably put in the part where I asked Munir about this and how he felt about punishing the player. What are your thoughts on punishing players for dying? I noticed when I was dying, I was losing 10 crystals. I talked to someone, they said that wasn't necessarily the end state.
Yes, it's a great question. You know, we did that because at a specific moment, sometimes we had people that were, you know, going into traps with no pressure. They felt the feeling of pressure and of danger from the environmental surroundings. So with this, it's just 10 crystals, but for us, it's really easy to pick up new crystals. This is really easy to find new crystals, to find new enemies, and to surpass with this loss. You know, even Mario, when you die in Mario, you lose 10 coins.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to remember. For us, we want to be sure that players feel the game fair.
Is this as frustrating as the NES entry? This isn't nearly as frustrating as the NES game. Man, I remember when I reviewed that game and how frustrated I got not being able to jump over things and getting impaled on spikes. This is much more forgiving, and the controls are like 8,000 times better. So yeah, I also did ask the game director about how the original influenced things, and here's what he had to say. So I haven't played a whole lot of Prince of Persia. In fact, the only one I've played is the original. Yes. Did you or anyone else go like all the way back to the original to look at anything?
Yes, it was kind of, you know, really personal there because I have a lot of souvenirs. I remember playing with my friend on the first Prince of Persia. It was, you know, in a time where the game were really not cryptic. This is not the right term, I think, but this kind of game was respecting player skill and cleverness, and we wanted to bring this back to our game. This sense of isolation, the sense that you are creating your own story, and this is the kind of thing that we took from the original episodes, right. And some symmetries, some traps, and other things that I don't want to spoil. But if you play the game, you'll see that between the original games and the latest ones, we took a lot of specific ideas.
Excellent. Yeah, the thing I noticed most was the spikes.
Yes.
In terms of inspiration.
But, just having a potion to refill your life. This kind of details, and there's a lot of details in it.
Not gonna be any potions that can kill you, are there?
Not
okay. Does it relate to any of the other timelines, like the 360 era reboot? How story-centered is it? I would say that it's going to be fairly story-heavy. They do seem to have a story that they really want to tell about Sargon. It's all set in the same universe, and the developers stressed sort of wanting to respect previous entries in the series, but it's really telling its own story with a completely different set of characters. Another question here about how does traversal and combat differ from the most recent game? Curious what innovations have been made to justify another Prince of Persia game, a series that was effectively killed off in favor of Assassin's Creed. Like a spiritual successor, I'm curious how this will stand out and keep from being Assassin's Creed Light. I mean, the most obvious thing is that this is a 2D platformer metroidvania game as opposed to a 3D open world action adventure game like the Assassin's Creed games are. I don't really see that much of a similarity between them, although I'll be honest and I say I don't like or play any Assassin's Creed games, so I don't know a ton about them. But yeah, I mean, this is a much more akin to any 2D platformer than it is to sort of the most recent Prince of Persia's or Assassin's Creed games. Someone asks, what makes it Prince of Persia-y? And I guess spikes, for one. There's lots of spikes. It's set in Persia. It uses Persian mythology. You need to find a prince of Persia. And there's time powers and smooth animations, which have been present since the original version. Are there any grind RPG mechanics like skill tree or levels, or is it like Rayman Legends? There's some like light RPG mechanics. I wouldn't expect there to be a ton of grinding. You do collect the time crystals, which you can use to buy upgrades for yourself, as well as new items and amulets and things like that. But as far as I saw, there was no XP leveling. I did not see any skill trees either. Why has he lost his crown? Clumsiness, carelessness, or he didn't like to be seen wearing it? So I think the lost crown refers to the prince who has been kidnapped. So it's not a physical crown, it's like the station. Can you wall run in this game? It's 2D, so not really. You can wall jump. And the last question is, what game would you compare it to, and how would you rate overall enjoyability on a scale of 1 to 10? When thinking about other Metroidvanias, the thing that most came to my mind was Strider, which I think is from 2014. I find this looks much more interesting than Strider does, but that same sort of like really smooth, slick combat, I kind of feel like there's a bit of a similarity there, as well as in terms of like how you explore the world and things. And overall enjoyability, I'd give it probably an 8 right now. Again, I need to see more. I mean, so much of what I enjoy of Metroidvanias are that exploration element, and though I did get to explore a little bit, it didn't quite have that satisfaction of finding new abilities and things because I was given so many abilities to kind of start with. But yeah, I'm looking forward to playing more in January. All right, so that's basically all I have to say about the game, but for anyone interested in how this opportunity came about, I was actually on vacation. I was in New Orleans, and I got this email from someone who said they were on the Ubisoft marketing team. And I was like, oh, whatever. They probably just want to like send me a game key or something. So I didn't even respond to it until I got home from vacation. And then I look at it more and they're like, oh, we like your channel. We like the kind of games you cover. We have an opportunity for you, but you have to sign this NDA before we can tell you anything else. So I was like, okay. I signed the NDA. They get back to me and tell me, oh, we have this new unannounced game. It's a 2D side scroller. It looks like something you'd be interested in. And we would like to bring you out to Ubisoft Montpellier in order to get a hands-on demo, talk to the developers, and get like a big VIP experience. And so they're like, you want to come? It's like, yeah, I do. I do want to go to France. Thank you. I was pretty excited because when I first got an Ubisoft email, I thought like, all of their AAA games, and like I don't really play the kind of open world stuff that they're mostly known for right now. However, Ubisoft Montpellier is the studio that like makes all the Ubisoft games I like. They did Rayman Legends, which is in like one of my top 10 games of all time, and a bunch of the people on this project worked on Rayman Legends. They did Beyond Good and Evil way back, Valiant Hearts, so I was super stoked that I was going to get to go to this studio in particular. I had no idea what the game was going to be. I wouldn't know until they handed me my little press badge when I walked in the studio. I had been speculating for a little bit. I was thinking a new Rayman game. That was the first thing that came to mind, since I do talk about Rayman fairly often on my channel. But then I was also thinking it was probably something Metroidvania related. I just kind of had an inkling. I was thinking, is there a Rayman Metroidvania? I had no clue that it was going to be Prince of Persia, but it was pretty cool. The other thing that was weird was that this is like the first time I've ever done something like this. So when they came out and said, hey, we want to bring you to France, I was like, I'm gonna get human trafficked, right? I'm gonna wake up in a bathtub without kidneys. But nope, I looked up the person who was contacting me, saw her LinkedIn, saw that she actually worked for Ubisoft. Did not get human trafficked, so I flew from Toronto to Paris and then Paris to Montpellier. I had the afternoon and evening in Montpellier, walked around, sat in cafes, drank wine, went out for a nice dinner, and then the next day was just the whole day at Ubisoft. Met some other creators as well as some marketing people from the Ubisoft San Francisco office, and then everyone went out for dinner afterwards. And then the next day I took like the latest flight home I could take, so I went down to the Mediterranean, walked around there, ate some seafood, drank more wine, and yeah, so it was like a bit of a whirlwind of a trip. I was only there for like one full day and 2 half days, but it was a lot of fun and a really cool experience, and I'm glad I answered that email. All right, so that's it. That's everything I know and think about Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. If you have any more questions that I haven't answered here and I can answer them at all, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. If you want to see more, check out some of my other videos about Metroidvanias here. I have a Patreon if you want to support my channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.